In the heart of the Vatican, among its grandiose walls, lies more than just a symbol of religious power. It hides mysteries, secrets that have been buried for centuries. From the embalming of saints using ancient Egyptian techniques to the safeguarding of legendary treasures from the Nile civilization, the Vatican is a vault of unresolved questions. Today, we will uncover 7 of the most chilling and enigmatic mysteries that have remained locked within this sacred institution. For over 2 millennia, the location of Alexander the Great's tomb has been one of history's greatest unsolved mysteries. Many have searched tirelessly from Egypt to Greece, hoping to uncover the resting place of one of the most significant figures in history. Yet, despite all the efforts and numerous theories, the final resting place of Alexander has never been conclusively found. From ancient texts to modern-day explorers, the hunt for his tomb has captivated historians and adventurers alike. But what if the answer does not lie in the sands of Egypt, as most believe? What if, in fact, the tomb of Alexander the Great is hidden, somewhere unexpected, somewhere right in the heart of Europe? Imagine the most famous conqueror in history, not buried in Alexandria or Memphis, but in Venice, Italy, behind the sacred walls of the Basilica di San Marco. A theory proposes that after Alexander's death in 323 BCE, his body was placed in Alexandria. The city, which was to become a major hub for intellectual and religious life, became the final resting place for many of history's greatest figures. But over time, historical turmoil, invasions, and the rise of different empires led to the disappearance of Alexander's tomb. What happened to it? According to this fascinating theory, Alexander's body was stolen by a Venetian merchant and smuggled into Italy. In an astonishing case of mistaken identity, his remains were later believed to be those of Saint Mark the Evangelist. Those very remains would eventually find their way to the Basilica di San Marco in Venice, where they have rested for centuries. For nearly a millennium, tourists and pilgrims alike have revered the relics of what they believe to be Street Mark, unaware that they may actually be gazing upon the body of one of the greatest conquerors the world has ever known. History, it seems, is often marked by inexplicable absences. The question is, could this one particular disappearance be a deliberate act to erase a powerful historical figure from the record? The theory asserts that the disappearance of Alexander's tomb, once widely known and visited by figures like Julius Caesar and Augustus, is too strange to be mere coincidence. Within just a few generations, every trace of it seemed to vanish, as though deliberately erased from history. The question is, why would anyone want to erase Alexander from the historical record? And if the mummy inside St. Mark's Basilica truly belongs to Alexander, we may be looking at one of the largest historical cover-ups in the world. What does this say about the power of the Vatican, about history, and about the ways in which sacred symbols can be altered? Could this be an example of how religion and history intertwine in complex and sometimes disturbing ways? The discovery of Alexander's remains would not only solve a centuries-old mystery, but also force us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about the past. Part 1. The hidden remains of Alexander the Great. For over 2 millennia, historians and explorers have scoured the globe in search of the final resting place of Alexander the Great. Countless tombs have been proposed, with some even being speculated to lie hidden beneath the sands of Egypt. Yet none have yielded the emperor's remains, despite the undeniable significance of his life and death. Why, then, would such a historically pivotal figure leave behind no trace? It is almost as if a deliberate effort was made to erase his memory from history. One of the most striking theories is that Alexander's tomb does not lie in Egypt at all, but rather in the heart of Venice, Italy, in the Basilica di San Marco. This theory suggests that after his death in 323 BCE, Alexander's body was embalmed and placed in Alexandria, Egypt, which at the time was an immensely important city for both intellectual and religious purposes. The tomb of Alexander the Great was reportedly a popular site for centuries, visited by emperors and figures such as Julius Caesar and Augustus. However, after Alexandria experienced a number of devastating invasions and turmoil over the centuries, the location of the tomb became lost. What if Alexander's body did not simply vanish, but was stolen and smuggled out of Egypt, hidden away for centuries in a far-off city? According to this theory, a Venetian merchant took it upon himself to transport the remains from Alexandria, eventually bringing them to Venice. Upon their arrival, the body was confused for that of Saint Mark the Evangelist, a Christian martyr, and one of the apostles. Over time, these remains were enshrined in the Basilica di San Marco, and for centuries, pilgrims and visitors have been unknowingly venerating the body of one of the most famous military leaders in history, thinking they were honoring a Christian saint. The idea that a figure as renowned as Alexander the Great could be lost to history in this way is mind-boggling. The fact that such an important relic could be mistaken for someone else entirely speaks to the broader mysteries surrounding the Vatican, and the lengths to which some would go to obscure the past. If the theory is correct, we might be facing the largest historical cover-up in Western civilization. For hundreds of years, people have been offering prayers to what they believe to be St. Mark's relics, unaware that they were gazing upon the body of a conqueror who had changed the course of history. But why would the body of Alexander the Great be hidden away in the first place? Was it to protect the memory of a powerful leader who once shaped the world, or to prevent a narrative that could potentially disrupt the Catholic Church's influence over centuries of European history? These questions remain unanswered. But one thing is certain. The theory that Alexander's remains lie hidden within the Vatican raises profound questions about the way in which history is recorded, remembered, and even manipulated by those in power. Part 2. The Horus Theory. Religious stories have shaped our understanding of the world for millennia. These ancient narratives, often woven into the fabric of culture, ethics, and personal beliefs, provide a sense of meaning and purpose to those who follow them. For countless generations, we have accepted these stories as central to the human experience. But what if some of the most revered stories in history are not as unique as we think? One of the most controversial and thought-provoking theories is that the story of Jesus Christ, one of the most important figures in Christianity, may not be entirely original. In fact, it could be rooted in much older myths. Could the life of Jesus have been a retelling of an even older story, one from ancient Egypt, the Egyptian god Horus, whose tale predates Christianity by thousands of years, shares several striking similarities with Jesus Christ, suggesting that the story of Jesus might not be entirely unique. Horus, an ancient Egyptian god worshipped by millions, is said to have been born to the goddess Isis. According to Egyptian mythology, Isis was a virgin, and the birth of Horus was heralded by a star in the sky, similar to the nativity story of Jesus, where a star led the wise men to the newborn Christ. Horus's mother, Isis, shares a remarkable resemblance with the Virgin Mary in both name and character. As Horus grew, his earthly father was said to be Osiris, a god of the underworld, while Jesus' father was Joseph, a man of humble beginnings. The similarities continue, with Horus's life following a pattern that mirrors the life of Jesus in several ways. Both Horus and Jesus performed miracles. Horus healed the sick, cast out demons, and even resurrected the dead. Perhaps the most striking comparison is the resurrection itself. Just as Jesus was crucified, buried for 3 days, and then resurrected, Horus, too, was said to have been betrayed, killed, and then resurrected. Horus was not only born of a virgin, but his birth also marked the arrival of a savior, and he, too, was baptized in a sacred river. The parallels are so numerous that some have speculated that the story of Horus could be a precursor to the tale of Jesus, with later generations retelling the same myth through a different cultural lens. Why do these similarities exist? Could the story of Jesus have been a reinvention or adaptation of an older myth? The similarities between Horus and Jesus are so uncanny that they raise the question: did Christianity simply adopt and adapt elements of Egyptian religion? Or is it possible that the figure of Jesus Christ was influenced by many such myths across different ancient cultures? If this is the case, what does this say about the development of religions throughout history? The idea that Jesus' story might not be entirely unique is, of course, not universally accepted. Many scholars and theologians have rejected the notion that Christianity borrowed directly from ancient Egyptian mythology. Some argue that the differences between the two stories are significant enough to dismiss the theory altogether. For instance, while Horus is often depicted with 4 followers, Jesus had 12 disciples, and his resurrection, while mirroring that of Horus in some ways, differs in the context and meaning. Furthermore, In some versions of the Horus myth, there is no formal baptism, and the exact nature of Horus's miracles differs from the accounts of Jesus in the New Testament. Despite these differences, the similarities are undeniable. The life of Horus, with its virgin birth, baptism, 12 disciples, and eventual resurrection, certainly bears a striking resemblance to the life of Jesus. Whether or not this is a case of one story influencing another, or simply a coincidence that two religions have developed along parallel lines, is a matter of ongoing debate. The question of why these themes seem to repeat across different cultures and time periods remains an intriguing one, suggesting that myths and religious stories may serve a deeper, shared human purpose. Could the story of Jesus simply be one of many retellings of an older myth, shaped by the culture and context of its time? The idea that Christianity is merely a continuation of ancient religious stories challenges the belief that Jesus' life was entirely unique. Instead, it suggests that human beings have been telling similar stories for centuries, adapting them to the needs of their time, while retaining certain core themes. If this theory holds any weight, it forces us to rethink not only the origins of Christianity, but also the evolution of religious narratives throughout human history. The origins of these sacred stories may be more complex than we realize. As religions evolve and intertwine, it becomes clear that no story, no matter how deeply ingrained in culture, is entirely isolated. The tale of Jesus, then, may not be as singular as we once believed, and the myth of Horus is just one example of the many stories that have influenced religious thought throughout the centuries. Part 3. The Library of Alexandria. At its peak, the Library of Alexandria stood as one of the most remarkable achievements of the ancient world. Founded in the 3rd century BCE during the reign of the Ptolemaic dynasty in Egypt, the library was a hub of intellectual and scholarly activity. Its collection housed hundreds of thousands of scrolls, manuscripts, and texts that recorded the knowledge of the ancient world. Everything from astronomy and mathematics to philosophy and literature, the library became a beacon of learning, attracting scholars from all corners of the known world, including Babylon, India, Greece, and Persia. It was regarded as the very heart of human intellect, preserving knowledge from civilizations that no longer existed, and shaping the future of humanity. But as much as the Library of Alexandria was a symbol of enlightenment and intellectual freedom, its eventual destruction is one of the most tragic losses in history. Over the centuries, the library faced numerous setbacks, some accidental, others deliberate. The most widely accepted theory is that it was destroyed during the Siege of Alexandria in 48 BCE, when Julius Caesar's forces set fire to the city. It is believed that the fire spread to the library, burning countless scrolls and texts in the process. Yet, the destruction of the library is shrouded in mystery. While this account is widely accepted, many questions remain about whether it was truly a single event that led to the library's demise, or if the process of dismantling it was more gradual and deliberate. The loss of the Library of Alexandria is often viewed as the loss of knowledge itself. Many of the texts housed within its walls were considered irreplaceable works on astronomy, medicine, philosophy, and geography that had been passed down by some of the greatest minds in history. In the wake of the library's destruction, much of this knowledge was lost to time. Yet some scholars believe that the library's treasures did not vanish entirely. Instead, they speculate that the most precious scrolls, those that held the key to understanding the ancient world, were quietly moved and hidden away, eventually making their way to Europe, where they were safeguarded by the Catholic Church. One of the most intriguing possibilities is that some of the manuscripts from the Library of Alexandria were secretly relocated to the Vatican. There have long been whispers about hidden archives within the Vatican, containing ancient texts that are not available to the public. Some believe that the Vatican may hold a treasure trove of knowledge from the ancient world, including works from the Library of Alexandria that were deemed too valuable to destroy. These texts could include detailed maps of undiscovered lands, ancient medical knowledge, and cosmic philosophies that could radically change our understanding of the world. The Vatican has long been known for its extensive collection of historical documents and manuscripts, many of which remain closely guarded. Some researchers who have studied the Vatican's archives claim that there are rooms deep within the institution that contain rare and ancient manuscripts from the medieval and Renaissance eras, and possibly even from much earlier times. These rooms are said to be heavily protected, with limited access granted only to a select few. The Vatican has never confirmed or denied the existence of these hidden archives, but their very existence is a source of fascination for historians, scholars, and conspiracy theorists alike. Could it be that the Vatican holds the secrets of the ancient world, preserved for centuries by the Church? If so, what knowledge might still be contained in those hidden rooms, waiting to be uncovered? And what role might the Church have played in safeguarding these ancient scrolls? The loss of the Library of Alexandria was a tragedy, but if some of its knowledge was secretly relocated, it could represent a crucial link to a lost era, an era that may hold the answers to some of history's greatest mysteries. Part 4. The Egyptian Museum of Pope Gregory. In 1839, Pope Gregory XVI established one of the most unique museums in the world, the Gregorian Egyptian Museum. Nestled within the Vatican's vast complex, this museum is home to an extraordinary collection of ancient Egyptian artifacts, ranging from statues of deities to inscribed stone stelae, from mummified remains to intricately carved relics that have survived for thousands of years. But the very existence of these artifacts within the Vatican raises a complex and uncomfortable question. How did such treasures from a civilization located thousands of miles away end up in the heart of the Catholic Church? The origins of the Gregorian Egyptian Museum's collection are rooted in a darker chapter of history. The treasures that now rest quietly within the museum were not obtained through peaceful means. They were, in fact, spoils of conquest. The Roman Empire, after its victory over the forces of Cleopatra and Mark Antony in 31 BCE at the Battle of Actium, began to plunder Egypt's ancient sites, seizing its statues, sacred relics, and even mummies. These items were taken as trophies of war, symbols of Rome's dominance and control over the once glorious civilization of the Nile. As the centuries passed, these stolen treasures were dispersed across Europe, eventually finding their way into the Vatican's hands. While the Gregorian Egyptian Museum opened its doors to the public in the 19th century, with the noble intention of preserving these ancient relics for future generations, the museum's origins remain uncomfortable for many. These artifacts were not gifts or donations from Egypt, but rather, they were taken by force during Rome's expansion and military campaigns. Some of the most prized relics of Egyptian civilization were once sacred objects, worshipped by the people of Egypt, but in Rome, they became mere decorations, signs of power and conquest. Today, the Vatican claims these relics as part of its effort to preserve the heritage of human civilization. But modern Egyptians have long fought for the return of their cultural patrimony. The ongoing dispute over the rightful ownership of these artifacts underscores a larger issue of cultural appropriation and the ethics of museum collections. As Egypt continues to demand the return of its stolen treasures, the Vatican remains silent on the matter. The Gregorian Museum's collection is vast, but what of the artifacts that are not on display? Are there other pieces hidden away in Vatican archives, potentially more valuable or controversial? There are rumors of undisclosed Egyptian relics items that were obtained in secrecy, perhaps even items that were never meant to be seen by the public. These objects, locked away behind Vatican walls, might hold keys to understanding Egypt's mystical past, including sacred texts, ancient scrolls, or ceremonial objects that could shed light on the religious practices of ancient Egypt. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Vatican's Egyptian collection is how it reflects the Church's long-standing fascination with the mystical traditions of ancient Egypt. The Church, often associated with the suppression of so-called pagan traditions, has a complex relationship with Egyptian culture. On one hand, the Vatican has sought to preserve Egyptian artifacts as part of its broader mission of collecting and protecting human knowledge. On the other hand, the Egyptian gods, mummies, and other relics it now houses were once viewed as symbols of power that the Church sought to supplant. The Gregorian Egyptian Museum remains a reminder of a time when empires claimed cultural treasures as trophies, and when the value of ancient artifacts was often measured in terms of their ability to demonstrate dominance. The museum's collection also serves as a testament to the Vatican's own complex role in preserving or concealing history. While the Vatican has made efforts to preserve and share these treasures with the world, it cannot escape the uncomfortable truth that many of these objects were obtained not through collaboration, but through conquest. Today, as Egypt pushes for the return of its stolen cultural heritage, the Vatican's collection remains a symbol of the tension between preservation and appropriation. Whether the artifacts will ever be returned to their rightful home is uncertain, But the ongoing debate highlights the complex relationship between culture, power, and history. As the Vatican continues to safeguard these ancient relics, it is clear that their presence within the walls of the Church will forever be intertwined with questions about ownership, power, and the ethics of cultural preservation. Part 5. The Forbidden Teachings of Jesus. In the early centuries of Christianity, the formation of the Bible was a deeply contentious process. Many texts, gospels, and teachings existed, offering a diverse and sometimes contradictory view of Jesus Christ's life and message. However, some of these writings were deemed heretical, excluded from the official canon, and deliberately suppressed. Among the most fascinating of these excluded texts is the First Apocalypse of James, a work that sheds light on a radically different vision of the world, one that challenges the foundations of Orthodox Christianity. The First Apocalypse of James was discovered in Egypt in the 19th century, among the fragments of ancient texts known as the Nag Hammadi Library. These manuscripts, dating back to the 3rd and 4th centuries CE, contained early Christian writings that were later rejected by the mainstream church. The First Apocalypse of James stands out among these texts because of its unique depiction of Jesus' teachings. Unlike the portrayal of Jesus in the canonical Gospels, this work presents a more apocalyptic vision, one in which the material world is not seen as a divine creation but rather as a prison forged by a false god. According to the First Apocalypse of James, Jesus reveals to his disciples that the world they inhabit is not the creation of the true God, but the work of a deceiver, a false god who created the material world to trap the human soul. This worldview is radically different from the traditional Christian belief that the physical world is the creation of God, and it challenges the notion of a benevolent creator who made the world as a place for human beings to thrive. In this alternate vision, the material world is portrayed not as a gift, but as a prison, and humanity's ultimate goal is to escape it and return to the divine realm. This apocalyptic vision is not only challenging in its rejection of the material world, but also in its portrayal of the spiritual struggle faced by humanity. The text suggests that human beings are trapped in a false reality, created by an evil God who wishes to keep them bound to the physical world. It is a message of spiritual liberation, urging followers to transcend the confines of the material world and return to the true divine reality beyond. The First Apocalypse of James presents a vision of Jesus that is radically different from the loving, compassionate figure of the canonical Gospels. Here, Jesus does not preach forgiveness in the same way. Instead, he imparts a secret, almost mystical knowledge to his disciples, urging them to awaken to the true nature of the world and to understand the deception that has been placed upon them. This hidden knowledge was considered too dangerous by the early church, which led to the exclusion of the text from the Bible and its suppression for centuries. Why was the First Apocalypse of James condemned by the church? The answer lies in the revolutionary ideas it presented. The text portrayed a Jesus who was less concerned with salvation through faith and more focused on awakening his followers to the hidden truths of the world. The concept of the material world being a prison created by a false god directly contradicts the mainstream Christian doctrine that teaches the material world was created by a benevolent God who calls humanity to live in harmony with it. This radically different vision of reality would have undermined many of the Church's teachings, particularly those surrounding creation, sin, and salvation. The fact that the First Apocalypse of James remained hidden for so long speaks to the lengths the Church went to suppress texts that threatened its established doctrines. For centuries, this text was locked away, considered heretical and dangerous. But the existence of such writings forces us to reconsider the foundations of Christianity and the extent to which the Church shaped the narrative of Jesus' life and teachings. If this apocalyptic vision was part of the original Christian message, then what else might have been excluded from the canonical Gospels? What other radical teachings did early Christians embrace that were later erased from history? The suppression of the First Apocalypse of James is just one example of how certain texts were deemed too controversial to be shared with the public. Many other writings, such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Judas, were similarly excluded from the official Bible. Each of these texts presents a different interpretation of Jesus' message, one that challenges the authority of the Church and presents a more diverse picture of early Christianity. Together, they suggest that the early Christian movement was not a monolithic entity, but rather a diverse collection of beliefs, some of which were later deemed heretical by the Church. The first Apocalypse of James is not just a religious text. It is a key to understanding the early development of Christian thought and the complex process through which certain ideas were rejected in favor of others. It invites us to question the orthodox narrative of Christianity and to explore the hidden, suppressed teachings that were excluded from the official canon. What truths were lost in the process? And what would the world look like if these forbidden teachings were not buried in the sands of time? Part 6. Two fake mummies in the Vatican. Deep within the Vatican's walls lies a quiet, enigmatic chamber where two mummified bodies have been displayed for centuries. For years, visitors have marveled at these ancient relics, believing them to be genuine mummies from Egypt, evidence of the Church's long-standing fascination with Egyptian culture and its mystical traditions. However, modern scientific advancements have uncovered a shocking truth. These mummies are not from ancient Egypt at all, but rather from a much more recent period, the Middle Ages. In 2007, a team of researchers from the Smithsonian Institution conducted a thorough examination of the mummies. Using DNA testing, radiocarbon dating, and other scientific methods, they made an astonishing discovery. The two mummies, once thought to be ancient Egyptian, were, in fact, from the medieval period. One of the mummies was found to be a woman who lived during the 14th century, while the other was a man from the 15th century. Their preservation was not the result of ancient Egyptian embalming techniques, but rather the result of a more recent and entirely different method of preservation. The discovery of these fake mummies raises a host of unsettling questions. Why were they created? Who was responsible for their fabrications? And perhaps most importantly, why were these mummies placed in the Vatican's collection, hidden from the public eye for centuries? The answer may lie in a strange cultural phenomenon that swept through Europe in the 19th century, mummy mania. During this period, there was a surge of interest in ancient Egyptian culture, spurred in part by the discovery of Egyptian tombs and the unearthing of relics during archaeological expeditions. Mummies became a prized possession, displayed in aristocratic drawing rooms, used as curiosities in public exhibitions, and even ground into powder for supposed medicinal purposes. The fascination with mummies was so intense that some individuals went to great lengths to satisfy the demand for these ancient remains. It was in this climate that the two mummies in the Vatican were created not as genuine relics, but as manufactured artifacts designed to fulfill the public's insatiable hunger for exotic and mysterious items. The fabrication of these medieval mummies is not an isolated incident. In fact, it was part of a larger trend in 19th century Europe, where fakes and forgeries were created to meet the growing demand for ancient artifacts. Wealthy collectors, eager to show off their knowledge of Egyptian culture, were willing to pay handsomely for mummies, even if those mummies were not authentic. Some forgers went so far as to create entire fake tombs, complete with elaborately decorated sarcophagi and ancient inscriptions. The fact that the Vatican, one of the most powerful institutions in the world, unknowingly acquired and displayed these fake mummies speaks to the bizarre and often murky world of artifact collecting during this period. Why would the Vatican, of all places, be involved in acquiring such forgeries? The answer lies in the Vatican's own fascination with the mystical and the exotic. The Church has long been associated with preserving ancient relics, both religious and secular. Its vast collections of manuscripts, artwork, and artifacts are a testament to its role as a custodian of human history. However, as the Vatican's collections grew, so too did the pressure to maintain and expand them. As interest in Egyptology surged in the 19th century, the Vatican found itself caught in the tide of global fascination with all things Egyptian. In this context, it is not entirely surprising that the Vatican acquired two fabricated mummies, unaware that they were not genuine artifacts. The discovery of the fake mummies raises questions not only about the Vatican's role in the 19th century cultural climate, but also about the larger issue of authenticity in the world of artifact collecting. What does it mean when institutions like the Vatican, which are supposed to be the protectors of sacred history, unknowingly acquire forgeries? It highlights the challenges of distinguishing between genuine artifacts and fakes, especially in an age when the demand for rare and exotic items far outweighed the scrutiny given to their authenticity. The two fake mummies are a reminder of the strange, often unpredictable nature of historical discovery. They also serve as a cautionary tale about the lengths to which people will go to satisfy the thirst for ancient relics. In the case of the Vatican, these mummies were not just curiosities, they were symbolic of a larger trend in which cultural treasures were commodified and manipulated for profit and prestige. As the Vatican continues to house these forgeries, their presence in the collection speaks to the complexity of history, the forces of cultural appropriation, and the fascinating world of ancient artifacts that have shaped our understanding of the past. Part 7. When saints do not decay. In Catholic tradition, the incorruptibility of a saint's body after death has long been considered a miraculous sign of holiness. When the bodies of saints remain preserved, untouched by time or decay, it is often interpreted as evidence of divine favor, an outward manifestation of the sanctity and purity of their lives. This belief is deeply ingrained in the Catholic faith, with many saints' relics being venerated by the faithful as a testament to their sanctity. But as the centuries have passed, a more unsettling truth has come to light. Many of the incorruptible bodies displayed in the Vatican may not be the result of divine intervention at all, but the result of intentional human manipulation. The phenomenon of incorruptible bodies, while considered miraculous by many, has raised questions in recent years. Some of the bodies that have been preserved for centuries, sometimes perfectly intact, sometimes with minimal decay, are, upon closer examination, found to have been embalmed using modern techniques. One of the most striking examples of this is the body of Pope John XXIII, who died in 1963. Despite the passage of more than half a century, when visitors gaze upon his remains, they appear almost untouched by time. He lies peacefully in a glass coffin inside Sacca Street, Peter's Basilica, his skin seemingly smooth, his features almost serene. But as with many such cases, experts believe this preservation is the result of modern embalming procedures, conducted with extraordinary care and skill, rather than divine intervention. In fact, between 1975 and 2008, a secretive group of specialists within the Vatican is believed to have embalmed at least 31 saints and other prominent church figures. The process used in these cases is a form of mummification, often influenced by ancient Egyptian burial practices. These techniques were adopted and refined in the modern era, specifically designed to preserve the bodies of saints for as long as possible, often with the explicit intention of creating the illusion of miraculous preservation. The bodies of these saints were not miraculously preserved through divine means. Instead, they were carefully treated and preserved by a team of experts using highly sophisticated methods. This revelation is not just an issue of medical curiosity. It also raises theological questions. The Catholic Church has long maintained that the incorruptibility of a saint's body is a sign of their holiness, a divine affirmation of their virtuous life. But if these bodies were intentionally preserved using modern embalming techniques, does that not challenge the very concept of incorruptibility as a sign of sanctity? Does it not cast doubt on the miraculous nature of the phenomenon itself? One of the most famous cases is that of Pope Pius XII, who died in 1958. His body was embalmed in a manner meant to emulate the burial of Jesus Christ, wrapped in linen and sealed within an enclosed space. However, the attempt to preserve his body was a failure. His corpse began to decompose rapidly, emitting a foul odor so overpowering that a guard reportedly fainted from the stench. The Pope's nose deteriorated to the point of detachment, and the body began to show the signs of decay that one would expect from any other corpse. This failure of preservation led to questions about the authenticity of the incorruptibility of other saints' bodies, and whether the Church was manipulating these physical signs to reinforce the image of divine intervention. The practice of embalming saints raises a troubling question. Does the Church's manipulation of nature to create the illusion of miracles ultimately betray the very spirit of faith that it seeks to honor? When the Church goes to great lengths to preserve the bodies of saints in this manner, are they protecting a genuine sign of holiness? Or are they attempting to manufacture a miraculous event to reinforce their authority? By deliberately preserving the bodies of saints, the Vatican is essentially manipulating nature in a way that challenges the purity of the faith. This raises ethical concerns about the authenticity of the relics and the potential for the Church to use these preserved bodies as a means of controlling the narrative of holiness. The Church's continued reverence for the incorruptible bodies of saints, whether preserved by divine means or by human intervention, is a reflection of the power these relics hold over the faithful. Saints, their relics, and their preserved bodies are seen as sources of spiritual power. But when the miracle of incorruptibility is revealed to be the result of modern embalming, it forces the Church and its followers to confront a difficult truth. The miraculous preservation of saints' bodies may be less about divine intervention and more about human intention. In many cases, these preserved bodies may not be signs of holiness at all, but instead, carefully constructed symbols meant to reinforce the authority of the Church. The issue of incorruptibility, whether real or manufactured, also raises questions about the broader role of relics in Catholicism. Are these objects and bodies truly holy, or are they simply physical symbols, imbued with meaning through the belief and faith of the people who revere them? Does the act of preserving a body to prevent its decay make it more sacred, or does it diminish the natural process of life and death? These questions are not easily answered, and the issue of incorruptibility remains a deeply complex and controversial topic within Catholic theology and history. The case of Pope Pius XII, whose body failed to be preserved despite the Church's best efforts, serves as a stark reminder of the limitations of human manipulation. No matter how sophisticated the techniques, no matter how carefully preserved, every human body will eventually succumb to time and nature. In the end, the question remains, do the preserved bodies of saints reflect divine intervention, or are they simply a carefully constructed illusion designed to perpetuate the idea of holiness? What happens when faith and science collide in such a profound way?